My sister-in-law slept with my best friend at my own engagement party. And my family spent the next year acting like I was the villain. For not getting over it fast enough. Here's how I finally made every single one of them understand what consequences actually means. I'm Connor, 31, and I work as a project manager for a construction firm in Calgary. For most of my life I figured my family was solid. Not perfect but solid. Mom and dad in Airdrie. My older brother Wesley a 15-minute drive away. The kind of family that did Thanksgiving dinner together. And texted in a group chat that never really shut up. I thought we had each other's backs. Turns out I was the only one operating under that assumption. Wesley's 3 years older than me, and growing up he was the golden one without even trying. Not in a way anyone outside the family would clock. Just in the small stuff that piles up over 20 years. When we both played hockey, Dad made it to every single one of Wesley's tournaments, even the out-of-province ones. But he'd miss half of mine because work got busy. When Wesley brought home a C, Mom said he was well-rounded. When I brought home a B, she asked what happened. Coasted through a business diploma, at a college nobody's heard of. And my parents threw him a backyard barbecue with 40 people. I finished my civil engineering technologist program with honors, and they took me to Boston Pizza. I'm not even bitter about it anymore. Just stating facts. Wesley married a woman named Brielle when I was 26, and I'll admit, I liked her in that easy, default way you like your brother's wife. When she's never given you a reason not to. Confident, good with people, always the loudest laugh at the table. I didn't see anything coming from that direction. And that's not actually where this story goes, so don't worry about her. I met Vanessa at a friend's housewarming in Bridgeland. She worked in marketing for an oil and gas company downtown. Had this way of making you feel like you were the only interesting person in the room, and I fell for it completely. Looking back, there were flags. The way she'd get cold and competitive with other women in social settings. The way she'd accidentally end up in long conversations with guys at parties, and then act baffled that I'd noticed. But I was 27, and convinced I'd found my person, so I explained all of it away. By the end of that year, she'd moved into my place in Inglewood and we were talking seriously about a future. House in the suburbs eventually, a couple of kids, the standard package. She did most of the talking about what that future looked like. I did most of the agreeing. I'd learned that dynamic from my parents, without even noticing I'd learned it. My best friend since high school is a guy named Patrick. No, sorry, can't use that one. Let's say his name is Owen. Owen and I had been close since grade 10, the kind of friendship where he's in every important photo of your adult life. Best man material, obviously, which is exactly the role I gave him. Vanessa and I got engaged the following spring. I proposed at Lake Louise, which is the most Alberta thing I could have possibly done, and she cried and said yes. And we started planning a wedding for the following September. I'd saved for 8 months for the ring. A full carat, oval cut. Set me back close to $5,000 at a shop on 17th Avenue. And the look on her face when she opened the box made every dollar feel worth it. We threw an engagement party in July at my parents' place in Airdrie. The whole family there. Even cousins who normally only show up for funerals. Owen was there obviously, doing his best man duties. Making the toast, the whole bit. I remember at one point looking around the backyard and thinking, genuinely, this is it, this is my life coming together. I want you to sit with how good that felt, because I'm about to tell you how fast it disappeared. About an hour into the party I couldn't find Vanessa. I figured she was inside refilling something, helping my mom with food, normal stuff. I went looking for her because the photographer wanted us for pictures by the fire pit. The house was quiet in that specific way that means something's wrong. The kind of quiet you feel in your stomach before your brain catches up. I checked the kitchen, the living room, nothing. Then I heard something from the guest bedroom down the hall. The one my parents use for visiting relatives. The door was almost closed but not quite. I want to tell you I had some kind of premonition. But honestly I just thought maybe somebody was sick. I pushed the door open expecting to find a drunk cousin. Instead I found my fiancé and my best man, half-dressed, on the guest bed. At my own engagement party, in my parents' house, while 40 people were outside eating appetizers I'd paid for. There's a specific kind of silence that happens in a moment like that. Not the room going quiet. The room was already quiet. But something inside your own head going quiet. Like your brain just refuses to process it in real time and hands you the information in slow motion instead, frame by frame, so you can't pretend later that you didn't see clearly. I saw clearly. Owen's shirt on the floor. Vanessa's hand still on his chest. The ring catching the light from the hallway as she yanked the blanket up. Owen actually said the words, "It's not what it looks like." And I almost laughed, because what else was it supposed to look like? A wardrobe malfunction involving 2 people at the same time? I told him to get out. My voice came out flat and quiet, which somehow scared him more than if I'd yelled, because he scrambled for his clothes without another word. Vanessa tried to talk. I told her there was nothing to talk about. That she'd made her choice, and that she had until the next day to get her stuff out of my place. I walked back outside like nothing had happened, told the photographer I had a headache, and drove to my buddy Marcus's apartment in the East Village. Without calling first, he took one look at my face and asked what happened. I told him. He went pale and asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know yet. Which was the most honest thing I'd said all day. The full weight of it hit around 3 in the morning on his pull-out couch, staring at his ceiling fan. The questions just kept circling. How long had it been going on? Had it started before the proposal? Had they laughed about me? Had Owen sat across from me at hockey games? At my parents' dinner table, calling himself my best friend? While this was happening the whole time, I didn't sleep. The next day, Vanessa moved her things out while I was at work, and along with her own stuff, she took a few things that weren't hers. The espresso machine we'd gotten as a gift. A blanket I actually liked. And the framed engagement photo we'd had on the bookshelf, which I'm sure ended up in a dumpster somewhere. She left a note on the counter that managed to be both an apology and a request for my blessing in the same 3 paragraphs. Which is a genuinely impressive feat of emotional gymnastics. She wrote that she'd fallen for Owen. And never meant for it to happen this way. And that she hoped someday I could be happy for them. Happy for them. I crumpled the note and put it straight in the recycling. Because even the garbage felt like too much ceremony for it. My family found out within 2 days. Not from me, from Owen, who I assume was trying to get ahead of the story before I could tell it my way. My mom called first, and for the first day or two, she actually sounded like she was on my side. She kept saying she couldn't believe Owen would do that. That he wasn't welcome around the family anymore. That this was unforgivable. It felt good. Briefly. I should have known better than to trust how long it would last. Dad's reaction was different. When I finally picked up his call 2 days later, he sighed the way he does when he thinks I'm being difficult about something minor, and said, "Well, these things happen, I guess." I told him these things don't just happen. People choose them. He told me not to be dramatic, that Owen was my friend and friendship survive worse. I hung up on him. Which I don't think I'd ever done before in my life. My brother Wesley tried to be neutral, which in practice meant saying, "That's really messed up, man," while never once suggesting Owen should lose anything over it. Brielle, his wife, was the only one who said flatly that what happened was disgusting. And that she'd cut Vanessa off completely, no hedging. I appreciated that more than she probably knew. For a few weeks I just went dark, let calls go to voicemail, answered texts with one word if I answered at all, and threw myself into work instead, picking up every extra project that came across my desk because the office was easier to be in than my own apartment. Which still smelled faintly like her shampoo, for reasons I couldn't explain. My manager, a guy named Greg, also can't use that. My manager, a guy named Trevor, noticed I was putting in long hours and asked if everything was okay. I gave him the professional version, told him I was dealing with some personal stuff and using the work to stay focused. He mentioned, almost in passing, that the firm needed someone to run a new site office out in Edmonton, a promotion with a serious bump in pay, and asked if I'd ever consider relocating. 3 hours up the QE2, away from my parents, away from Wesley's careful neutrality, away from the guest bedroom I now couldn't picture without flinching. I told Trevor I was very interested, and I meant it more than he could have known. When I told my parents I was moving for the job, Dad said it might be a good fresh start. Mom acted like I'd told her I was emigrating to another continent. She cried, asked what would happen to Sunday dinners, said I couldn't just leave the family behind. I told her I wasn't leaving the family behind, I was leaving Owen behind, the guy who'd actively chosen to torch my life. She said Owen wasn't part of the family circle anymore anyway, that they'd made that clear to him. I told her I'd believe that the day it actually held. Because I'd known her my whole life and she didn't do permanent. She insisted she would. I let it go because arguing felt pointless. The Edmonton move happened fast. Trevor fast-tracked the transfer. I gave notice on my lease, sold half my furniture, because I didn't want any of it carrying memories into the new place, and by the end of August I was gone. I didn't give anyone a forwarding address, didn't post about the move, just left. The new site office was a good distraction. New crew, new project. Nobody there who knew anything about my life 6 months earlier. For the first time since the engagement party, I could breathe without immediately thinking about that hallway. Of course it didn't last. In October, Mom called with that careful rehearsed tone she gets when she's about to say something she already knows I won't like. She told me Owen and Vanessa were together now, officially. And that they were planning a wedding for the following spring. I sat with that in silence long enough that she asked if I was still there. I told her I was, and that my answer to whatever she was about to ask was no. She asked anyway. Said they wanted to reconcile with me before the wedding, that they didn't want it clouded by old drama, that they wanted to apologize properly, face to face. I told her there was nothing to apologize for that a conversation could fix. And that I wasn't interested in giving anybody my blessing for anything. She tried the family unity angle, the my son is tearing. This family apart angle. It's been months you need to move on angle. I told her I had moved on to Edmonton, to a promotion, to an apartment that didn't smell like betrayal. And that emotional forgiveness wasn't part of the package, she cried. I'd heard that particular cry enough times growing up to know it was more strategic than it looked. Over the following 2 weeks I got calls from Dad, from Wesley, even from an aunt I hadn't spoken to since a cousin's funeral, all carrying some version of the same message. Let it go. Come to the wedding. Stop punishing everyone for one mistake. Dad tried the practical approach. Holding a grudge only hurts you, not them. I told him I wasn't holding a grudge. I was holding a boundary. And that those were different things he'd apparently never learned to tell apart. In November, a wedding invitation showed up at my Edmonton address. Printed on heavy cream cardstock, fancy script, the whole production. I had no idea how they'd gotten my new address. And I genuinely didn't want to know. I threw it straight in the trash without opening the RSVP card, because I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of even a formal decline. The wedding happened in April. I spent that Saturday at the gym for 2 hours, came home, made myself dinner, and watched hockey. Which felt like the most normal evening I'd had in months. My phone, which I'd left unblocked for work reasons, blew up that night with messages from relatives I barely talked to. Where are you? Your mother's devastated. How could you miss this? You're being selfish. I didn't respond to a single one. The fallout came the next day from Wesley, who called from a number I hadn't gotten around to blocking yet. He said, Mom had been humiliated, that Owen looked heartbroken walking in without me there. That everyone thought I was being needlessly cruel. I told him, that sounded like a personal problem for all of them. And he didn't have a great comeback for that. For a few months after that I actually had peace. Real peace. Built a life in Edmonton, made a couple of new friends through the job site. Started cooking again, started sleeping through the night again. Then February happened, and February is where this gets genuinely strange. I was at a coffee shop near the site office on a Saturday morning when Brielle, Wesley's wife, the one person from my family who'd actually been decent about all of it, walked in and spotted me before I clocked her. She looked surprised to see me there. Which made sense, since I hadn't told anyone where I'd be that morning. She sat down without asking, and told me in a low voice that my mother had hired a private investigator to track down where I was living and working. Because she was worried sick, and wanted to find a way to fix things before they got worse. I asked Brielle how she knew that, and she said Mom had let it slip during a phone call, half bragging about it, like it was an act of devotion instead of what it actually was. I told Brielle that wasn't worry. That was stalking with better PR. She agreed with me, which I respected, because most of my family had spent 8 months calling it love. 2 weeks after that, my site supervisor told me there was a man asking for me at the front gate, refusing to leave. I already knew before I got down there. It was my father, standing by his truck in a hard hat. Someone had clearly handed him out of liability concerns. Looking older than he had at Christmas. He said we needed to talk. I said we really didn't, and asked how he'd found the site. He admitted Mom had hired someone. I told him that was illegal, in basically every province, and he should look it up. He flinched at how cold I sounded, told me that wasn't like me, that the son he raised wouldn't be this hard. I told him the son he raised had gotten walked over for 31 years, and finally stopped. He brought up Easter, said the whole family would be there including Owen and Vanessa, said we needed to sit down like adults at lot. I told him hard pass. That their family stopped meaning anything to me. The day they all decided being family meant pretending nothing happened. He said I was throwing away my whole history over one mistake. I told him it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of choices, and that he'd been calling it the wrong word for 8 months because the right word made him uncomfortable. Before he left, I told him plainly that if anyone from the family showed up at my work site again, I'd be filing a restraining order, and that I meant every word of it. The real breaking point came in March. I got home from a late shift to find my parents, and Wesley sitting on the front step of my building, and Owen and Vanessa standing by their car in the parking lot. Like they'd come along for moral support, or maybe just to finish the job properly this time. I told them to get off the property before I'd even gotten out of my truck. Mom stood up immediately, doing the sympathetic face that's never once been genuine in my memory, and said they'd driven 3 hours to see me, that I owed them 10 minutes. I told her driving 3 hours to a location they obtained through a private investigator didn't make her dedicated. It made her a stalker with a longer drive than usual. Owen stepped forward, started in on how sorry he was, how he'd regretted it every day since. I told him he wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry it had consequences. And that if he was actually sorry he wouldn't have married the woman he turned here 4 months later. Vanessa started crying, said she'd loved me but fell for Owen, that it wasn't planned. I told her it absolutely was planned, that walking into a guest bedroom at someone else's engagement party isn't an accident. It's a series of decisions. And she'd made every single one of them. That's when Mom said the line. that finally snapped something loose in me. She said the Christian thing, the family thing, was to forgive and move forward together. I told her the Christian thing would have been not sleeping with best friend at my own engagement party, and that we were a little past that conversation now. I pulled out my phone, started recording, and told all 5 of them, clearly on camera, that I would never forgive Owen, never forgive Vanessa, and never have a relationship with the rest of them again, as long as they kept choosing this. I told them they had 60 seconds to get off the property before I called the police, and that if any of them showed up anywhere, I'd be filing for a restraining order against the lot of them. They left slowly, the way people do when they're hoping you'll change your mind mid-sentence. I didn't. I went inside, locked every door, and started the paperwork that same night. Having video of 5 adults refusing to leave a property after being repeatedly told to go speeds. That process up more than you'd think. It's been 10 months since the restraining order went through. Brielle still texts me occasionally, and she's the only one I answer. Everyone else gets silence. Which, as it turns out, is the most peaceful sound I've heard in years.